We're going to start with a little known game, but one which, as far as I'm concerned, is the ultimate seal of approval for White's opening idea, because playing with the white pieces is none other than Garry Kasparov himself. And he's playing in a simultaneous display given in Sao Paulo 2004 against a fellow called Augusto Horiguti. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking, well, this is a simultaneous display. What impact could a game like this possibly have? But the fact is that Kasparov usually chooses very strong opponents in these simultaneous displays just to give himself a challenge, obviously. So I think we can assume that Horiguti is a pretty strong player. Now, why would Kasparov choose the London system? Well, I think for two reasons. Because he understands that however Black plays, he's going to get a strong, stable position as White out of the opening, which is very difficult to sort directly. And then secondly, the London system gives White a clear middle game plan, irrespective of the variation that Black chooses in response. So this is, of course, perfect for the simultaneous display giver, in that when he comes to the board, he's playing a whole array of strong opponents. He just wants to be able to play a strong move and have a clear idea of where he's going. And this is exactly what the London system affords. So let's go through the opening moves now of Kasparov-Horiguti, and we see right away that White's system of play is very economical. He just brings out his pieces very carefully. The pawn structure is adjusted to suit the bishops. Both white bishops are not blocked in, and White will castle on the next move. Now, quite often in the London system, White plays an early h2 to h3. We'll see that Kasparov artfully delays this move until Black plays d6. There's no real point in playing h3 early on until Black has played d6 against the King's Indian setup, because in general, after d6, Black is probably threatening to go knight h5, and this is why you would want to play h3, to give your bishop a retreat square on h2, nullifying the effect of knight h5. We'll see actually that Kasparov delays h3 for even one more move in this game, because, well, he doesn't figure that knight h5 was such a threat on the last move. But now the knight has come to d7, and Black makes it clear what he's going to do. He's going to basically play e7, e5. It's wisest for White to create that retreat square on h2 for the bishop. This is a very common idea in the London system. It occurs in virtually all variations where Black blocks the h2 to b8 diagonal. And so queen e8. Alright, now here comes the move which I think gives the London system bite against fianchetto setups on the king side by Black. Pawn up to c4. We'll see later on that White can play, if he wishes, pawn up to c3 in this position, but it doesn't have quite the same effect on the game, because in general White's plan in this position is to push the queenside pawns. We'll see the queenside pawns coming up the board towards Black's position, and eventually the move White hopes to play is pawn up to c5, which is going to open up the diagonal for the bishop on f4 and create pressure all the way down to c7. So c4 is an essential link in that chain. No time is wasted in the queenside advance. So the thing is, where is Black going to develop counterplay against this idea? I mean, he can't just sit there and let White strut his stuff on the queen side. So he's going to create counterplay on the king side in the centre, and thus e5 is the logical follow-up to both knight bd7 and queen e8. And of course White retreats to bishop h2, just getting the bishop out of the way. And now knight e4. Again, a move with two ideas. First idea is to clear the way for Black's f-pawn. It's traditional in the King's Indian defence to push this pawn to f5, which in turn gives Black space and attacking chances on the king side. So that's the first point in moving the f6 knight. The second point is that Black is slightly short on space in this position, so it makes sense to exchange pieces. And so with knight e4, Black is anticipating the development of White's knight on b1, whether to c3 or d2, and he's simply going to snap it off then. The idea is, with less space, exchanging pieces is a good idea. It gives your remaining pieces more room in which to move. So Kasparov figures, well, I can't really do without developing my knight on b1, I better get it out. And so black snaps it off. So all very logical play. Queen takes d2. This variation, to my knowledge, hadn't been played many times before, but there was a game, Yusupov versus Fuller, Esbjerg, 1980, where Fuller played the immediate e4 in this position. White played knight e1. Black now played queen e7. And Yusupov played his knight to c2. Later on, he pushed his queenside pawns, as discussed. Going back now to Kasparov-Horiguti, black preferred the move queen e7. But again, white was able to develop his pieces very, very logically and coherently, just bringing the rook to c1. And as stated, his plan is to push the queenside pawns and eventually play the key break, pawn up to c5, which opens up a lot of prospects for the bishop on h2. This is, I would say, the thematic play against the King's Indian setup. Well, black can't seem to see an active plan in this position. And I know this is the aspect of the London system that makes a lot of players throw up their hands in horror when they have to face this with black. Since I mentioned to a lot of my friends that I was doing a DVD on the London system, the usual response would be, oh, I hate playing against that. So I say, why, of course? And they say, well, because you can't do anything with black. And this is one of the great strengths of what white is doing. Okay, it might not set the house on fire in terms of dynamic play, but what it does do, it suppresses the opponent's counterplay. And I know that a lot of average players feel very, very uncomfortable when they don't have an active plan at their disposal. This, I would say, is one of the main psychological impacts of the London system. It puts the pressure on the opponent to find an active plan. And if black goes over the top, then of course white's coherent logical development comes to the fore, and he generally is able to get an advantage. So black can't do anything over exuberant. He's got to play very carefully and properly. But, well, I would say rook d8 errs on the side of caution a little bit too much, and essentially enables white to effect his main plan, which, as stated, is the advance of the queenside pawns. So b4, very logical move by Kasparov. Okay, black plays d5. That's an interesting move. Horiguti's trying to make sense of the rook on d8. I doubt it can be very good, but of course what he's trying to tempt white into doing is to closing the position with a move like c5. After which, well, I presume black is going to play a move like knight e8 and then try to push his kingside pawns. Kasparov's not to be tempted. Strong players like to maximise their options as much as possible, so he plays b5. And black plays knight e8. Anyway, pawn up to a4. Alright, bishop to e6, and only now does white play pawn to c5. So I don't think we can dispute that white has an advantage in this position. And just look at the impact of the bishop on h2, gazing all the way down to the pawn at c7. An ideal situation for the London system bishop. Well, now it's just a question of how white organises the pressure on the queen side. Kasparov decides to activate his sleeping knight on e1, and, well, black figures it is really about time I started to try and get some counterplay. Okay, knight b4, queen comes out to g5, and black creates his first threat of the game. Bishop takes h3. Bishop f4, safely negating black's idea and driving the queen back from her active position. Now white has all the time in the world to keep the queenside advance going, and black tries to counter on the other flank. You will find this in your games. The rule is, in opposite sides attacking positions, whoever is quickest wins. So I would say in this position, black is trying to catch up, but it's far too late, because with pawn to a6, white is already touching down on the queen side. This is a very instructive part of the game to see how Kasparov creates weaknesses against the entire black queen side. And now, after pawn to b6, the square c6 is juicily available for the knight. c takes b6. When you want to gain an advantage on a certain side of the board, it's a good idea to open that side of the board up. C takes b6. Black doesn't want to give white a strong passed pawn, but this gives Kasparov the chance to establish his knight on the dream square c6. Alright, queen to d7, rook to c1. And now f6, a miserable looking move, but black is placing the highest priority in keeping the white pieces out of the e5 square, either the knight or the bishop. Knight b8. A very photogenic move. I mean, how often do you get the chance to play a move like that in your own games? In this particular setup, it's become possible because white is so far ahead with his queenside attack. And now black is under real pressure on the queenside. He really is in trouble here. He doesn't want to cede the c file by playing rook takes c1, so he's trying to keep some control over the queenside squares by encouraging white to take on c8 first. But white's got everything covered. The knight comes back to c6. And now a7 is under fire. Queen d7 protecting that pawn. And now bishop to b8. And, well, if nothing else, this is a rather artistic move, because a few moments ago white was using the b8 square for a knight, forcing a concession. Now he plays bishop to b8. And this second incursion is, as you can see, a completely winning move, because there's no way for black to defend a7, after which the queenside disintegrates white's a-pawn queens. So really a fantastic winning idea by Kasparov. And now, of course, comes that small period of desperation in a game where the opponent realises he is lost and tries a last desperate counter-attack. And you're going to get this in lots of your games, especially when you've got the pawn on h3, which is kind of a red rag to a bull as far as black is concerned. And so black just snaps off that pawn and tries to create some confusion. But the problem for black is, of course, he's only got his queen attacking. It's going to take him several moves to muster any sort of reinforcements to the king's side. And so white, with the careful move queen d1, completely nullifies all of black's threats, threatens bishop g4. Well, that's virtually game over. A few more moves sees black limp to the finish, why Kasparov can even encourage black to play f5 in this position, because he can take it. Bishop takes f5. And of course, if queen takes f5 now by black, the knight comes into e7. And that is really game over. So going back to the game now, bishop takes f5, white really could expect black to resign. Queen f7 was played, queen g4, and that was enough for black. So a model demonstration by Kasparov there, featuring one or two artistic points, and it was ironic that in the final position, white was not only winning on the queen side, he was about to win on the king side as well.